Chapter 11. The Problem of the Indifferent Universe. Religion is an attempt to master the sensory world in which we are situated by means of the wishful world which we have developed within us as a result of biological and psychological necessities. But religion cannot achieve this. Its doctrines bear the imprint of the times in which they arose, the ignorant times of the childhood of humanity. Its consolations deserve no trust. Experience teaches us that the world is no nursery. Sigmund Freud, The Question of a Weltanschauung. Perhaps the greatest breakthrough of the scientific revolution was to refute the intuition that the universe is saturated with purpose. In this primitive but ubiquitous understanding, everything happens for a reason. Some agent must have wanted them to happen. People can be fingered for the misfortune and punished. If no mortal can be plausibly indicted, one might cast about for witches or point to sadistic gods who can be placated with prayers and sacrifices. These are the embodied forces like karma, fate, and cosmic justice that also follow. This cosmic morality play was replaced with a clockwork universe in which events are caused by conditions in the present, not goals in the future. People have goals, of course, but projecting those goals onto the workings of nature is an illusion. Things can happen without anyone taking into account their effect on human happiness. The first step toward wisdom is the realization that the laws of the universe don't care about you. The next is the realization that this does not imply that life is meaningless, because people care about you and vice versa. Anyone with a humanistic sensibility realizes that their existence is no less important than yours, and that we all have a responsibility to use the laws of the universe to enhance the conditions in which we all can flourish. Steven Pinker, Enlightenment Now. The Hexer is a monstrous being that stalks you, and the cause of your misfortune when it catches up with you. It is also a song I made up for metaphorical, poetical purposes, which actually is very close to how people actually think. It only takes a moment of honest observation, however, to acquaint oneself with the utterly indifferent nature of the universe that we inhabit. As we feel all revolves around us, examine all those extras on the set of your life next time you're out, and know that in all probability, the various fates will leave one with the impression that the goddess Fortuna is completely mad. He thinks God will never allow bad things to happen. I was once told in a letter that was a response to reading the book Letter to a Christian Nation by Sam Harris, which I had lent. It is not just bad things. There is incessant, pointless suffering, with the universe looking exactly as one would think it would if there was no God. An utterly indifferent one, a vast and inhospitable one that we're not the center of. Nature as an utterly indifferent, mindless process, the only morality coming from us, not the universe, no God, any God, protecting anyone. The universe visits suffering and misfortune on people equally, regardless of their religion or anything else. God has often been viewed as a father or as love, yet he, if he exists and is omnipotent and omniscient, is either negligent and unfit or completely malicious and hateful. Turn on the news, and eventually you'll witness a hurricane randomly slaughter children. Natural disasters, disease, birth defects, and other death or tragedy afflict people equally, regardless, again, of their religious beliefs or their actions, their age or innocence. Note that things such as natural disasters and disease have nothing to do with free will, with anything humans do. Contradicting the claim that God answers prayers, where there are the most prayers, the most religious societies tend to be the most hellish of all places to live, the least religious the best. The multitude and intensity of prayer seems to have no impact. The line that sometimes the answer is no to prayer stands in contradiction to Matthew 21:22. In all things, whatever ye shall ask in prayer, believing ye shall receive it, as well as in contradiction to all the starving and diseased, natural disaster-ridden, faithful children and mothers. There are plenty of secular, natural reasons for all of this. Why would Jesus or any God be bound by any of that? Belief may motivate, but only human thought and action ever achieve. Try thinking doctors, nurses, medicine, technology. It's all people. One could say humans are the ones who've been at work fixing the botched job that any God did. Suffering can be beneficial, but more times than not, it's just pointless horror. Things do happen for a reason, but only in terms of the laws of physics, of cause and effect. I once wrote, "We all bleed red inside. We're all scarlet, and scarlet by that light that is growth from days gone by. And yet, often there is no growth, there's just misery, disease, and death, and children being run over by cars, something no loving parent would ever allow if it was in their power to stop, and which also, of course, produces no growth in the deceased child, or quite often the distraught and destroyed parent. If a God created a heaven, then this world could have been made like a heaven, instead of the world we see. It could be survival of the kindest, instead of survival of the fittest. I digression on heaven. Is there free will there, as that's the excuse for suffering? Also, as touched upon, does endless praise of the dear leader, or watching your loved ones and other decent people burn in hell, sound particularly blissful or alluring? To reiterate once more, a God would ultimately be responsible for everything. It all could just be way over our heads, beyond our comprehension. But what that unsupported and speculative response to the problem looks like to its core is a made up excuse that does not at all fit the data. It does not fit what we see when we look at the universe. It's a rationalization of atrocity. Furthermore, does a future rectification of an injustice or horror, or the idea that it may serve some purpose, really absolve or make better the injustice or horror? If someone abuses and beats their child, then rewards them with ice cream, does that make the abuse and the beating okay? Or is the deep agony and horror and harm that exists still exists, and inexcusably so if there's an omnipotent God? A stain on the universe is still a stain on the universe. What has happened has happened. Yahweh may have eventually given Job new children after he cruelly killed his other ones on a bet, but the other children were still slaughtered. There is more embarrassment for theists grasping at these excuses to rationalize a benevolent deity with immense, random, pointless suffering, which is the fact that we have contradicting holy books, supposedly written or inspired by gods, contradicting explanations for suffering, and just the same holy book. Here are the contradicting biblical explanations for suffering as laid out at book length in God's Problem by Bart Ehrman. The Prophets. Suffering is a punishment for sin. The Book of Job, which offers two different answers. Suffering is a test, and you will be rewarded later for passing it. And suffering is beyond comprehension, since we are just human beings and God, after all, is God. Ecclesiastes. Suffering is the nature of things, so just accept it. There is no afterlife. All apocalyptic texts in both the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament. God will eventually make right all that is wrong with the world. Another strange accusation one will hear goes like this. You must be heard or mad at God. Let me clear this up since it seems to be necessary for some reason. A non-believer in God is not mad at any God, for they lack belief in or don't believe any gods exist, hence the word non-believer. A whole Christian apologetics movie starring a former Hercules actor as an atheist professor was based on this condescending fallacy. The believer is the one who believes in a God. They would be the ones to blame a God. What does being hurt have to do with not believing in God to the Bible? Does one have to be hurt to not believe in these things or anything? Obviously, this is an offensively absurd innuendo. I have observed that people turn to religion and superstition because life is hurtful, aside from the fact that they're indoctrinated from birth. Unlike most believers, non-believers are exposed to both sides and arguments of this issue by way of generally being born into the religion of their culture. As has been alluded to, it's also been said that religion, apart from providing explanations to the ignorance of our ancestors and being a consequence of the evolutionary survival tactic of our pattern-seeking brains, is a projection of the desire for the parent after a person has grown up. If the religious believer asserts that the universe is not indifferent, that prayers are answered, let me ask, if you believe everything happens according to your God's perfect will and plan, by prayer, are you not petitioning your God to alter his perfect will and plan? If God is all-knowing, does he not already know what is happening and what will happen? So why are you letting him know? If he is active in the world, and people can't seem to decide if he is or isn't, if he's beyond comprehension or isn't, is he not the cause of the negative thing you wish to better in the first place? Or at the very least the one who sat back and allowed it to happen and did nothing? By petitioning the creator of the universe to show preferential treatment towards you, is that not astoundingly arrogant, and does that not reflect that you are praying to an absurd, capricious, and cruel God, who ignores the raped and sick children, those randomly killed by a hurricane or disease, which perhaps he sent in the first place, the many children suffering and starving, just needing rain, but not getting it in places such as Africa. A God who chooses sides in football games and wars and your raise while choosing to not favor or to punish others, the other team, the other army, the other worker, so that you will benefit. Are you not by asking favor, asking that he harm others? Isn't the God paradigm rather like a mayor of a town choosing who will eat, succeed, or even live? Is this a moral, attractive, or in the least bit supportable or justifiable conception of how the universe works? How about children thanking a father for sparing them while their siblings beside them have either been slaughtered or allowed to be slaughtered by this father? Or alter it a bit, and the children have been fed and are thanking their father for their food, while their siblings beside them are lying dead of starvation despite there being enough food to go around. What is more likely to save you, surgery or prayer? What is most likely to ensure you reach the other side of the street safely, checking for traffic or prayer? Would you ever rely solely on prayer? Would you want government leaders to? Would you want government leaders or doctors to be led by their imagination with their eyes set to another world and viewing this world that we know we have as a dress rehearsal for it? Or would you want them to base decisions on facts and evidence in the betterment of this world? What of the fact that people are simultaneously praying to very different gods? When many are acts of prayer, does the quantity of prayer increase the likelihood that your God will intervene? I thought he did not intervene as to maintain free will. Also, don't loved ones and those who act out of love, in fact, intervene if a loved one is in danger. Does praying not lead people to complacently feel like they're doing something when actually they're not, and in many cases they could actually do something? Is there any evidence that prayer has ever done anything beyond serve as a placebo or show of solidarity? Not the universe revealed by science of how the universe operates and came about, nor the world we experience here on earth has been compliant with the anthropomorphic projections and expectations based on theism. Humans placed ourselves in earth at the center of the universe before we knew better, a naturally central religious cosmology. As discussed, we're less than a speck in an obscure corner of this immense universe, here for 13.6 billion years before us, a microscopic rock in the cosmic ocean. We have continually had our imagined self-importance in the universe demoted. We were the whole universe, the earth the central stage upon which we perform for our master. But only the moon revolves around the earth. The sun is at most a grain of sand. What might as well be a universe in our galaxy is one of billions of just what we can see, and whatever the size of the universe we occupy, it may only be yet another grain of sand upon the face of all that there is. The universe, as the child learns, is not here for us. Nature operates by its own mechanisms that appear to have nothing to do with what we think, pray, or do, or the whims of gods, something gleaned since the days of Thales in ancient Greece. People are understandably hesitant to face the tragedies that afflict us, but how can we improve things if we don't? If we refuse to objectively analyze and accurately diagnose things and merely decorate ourselves and our buildings with the effigies of our ignorance as portals through which to lose our minds in stories about other worlds? Though love and compassion are more conducive to happiness than their alternatives, again, fortune and misery visit people whether or not they are religious, whatever that religion might be, whether or not they are good or deserve it. Even if something like the B theory of time is true, and all time already exists as a branching tree that we can only experience a moment at a time, still, it remains true that as far as we are concerned, we are still indeed captains of our ships, masters of our own seas, whatever strange skies we may find ourselves under, whatever seemingly impenetrable seas we may find ourselves around. It is up to us to help each other and improve ourselves and our world.